Good morning, Flosstube. My name is Jeannette. I am the designer behind Blue Flower, and this channel is about cross stitch. Although if you're here for the puppy, there will be some pictures at the end for you to enjoy. We might actually make 20 minutes this time. I make no promise, but my notes have gone over 2 pages for the first time, so we'll see how we do. Thank you everyone for joining me today. I hope you're managing to stay cool where you are. That's a little bit difficult here. It's quite warm, but I know a lot of other places are having much higher temperatures than we are, so I feel for all of you, and I hope you have a nice cool place to stitch during the day and sleep during the evenings. So try and stay cool. Kicking right off with the Stitching in Action section, I have 2 things to feature today, 2 different finishes of Quilting Bee that have been shared through the website, and I think they're just a great illustration of how the same pattern goes in different directions depending on who's stitching it. So the first one is from Tamara, and she stitched using the called for threads over 2 on 36 count linen, which would make it slightly larger than the initial model. And she fitted it in an IKEA box with forest green palms. I think it looks so pretty, and I'm very envious of her photography skills as well. The next one, coincidentally, is from Tammy, and she stitched Quilting Bee 1/1, adjusted the pattern slightly, and it's fitting in a 6-inch LaHaye shaker box. You can see she took some of the edging off and adjusted the motifs a little bit so that they would fit, but I think that one looks beautiful as well. I love them both. I love that they've been made personal by each stitcher, and I think they did a wonderful job. All right, what I'm stitching. Well, I did actually get to make a little bit more progress on Maria Casson by Lucy Beam. So I have that one here to show and get it all the way in the frame there. I've made it all the way down to the center so you can see how big the end design will be. Sorry, shifting back. And started to get some of this in here. This will be the over 1 verse section, so I have been putting that off, but I think I'll get to it soon now that I've finished some of my other stitching. So I'm very pleased with the way it's coming out. I'm still loving the colors, loving the stitch, and very excited to have it done. Now, the reason I have made so little progress on that particular stitch is that I have been working on finishing a model for fall release. So I did finish that, which is great because that's been something on my mind and needing to be produced. The sad thing is that I was too late in getting it designed, so I had to stitch it myself, and I didn't have time to send it to a wonderful finisher who would have done a fabulous job. And so instead I had to do the finishing myself, which is not my greatest skill, and part of me is feeling regretful that I didn't get to have a beautiful finish put on it the way that I know someone like Jolynn at Acorns and Threads would do. She would make it look spectacular, and I'm not yet able to do that. But on the other hand, I don't want to focus too much on the imperfections. This is a journey for me, and so everything that I learn, there are so many great stitchers with wonderful experience willing to share with the rest of us how to do finishing, how to do different techniques, different embellishments, and so this is part of my journey, and this is an imperfect part, but an important part, and I'm not gonna apologize for the imperfections, although that is my instinct, but just appreciate the work that I've done and the improvement that I've made so far. So without further ado, I will show you one of the fall new releases. And here I go with more ado. The other one I was hoping to show today as well, but it is on its way back in shipping from the framer, so it'll be available for next time. They're both getting photographed next weekend, and then they'll get printed and off to shops by the end of the month. So this is tentatively Halloween Parade. I haven't entirely decided on the name yet, but that's the idea. We've got several things going on. The idea was to have it be, I'm mashing it a little bit, have it be as though all of the animals were going trick-or-treating. And so starting over here, we've got a cat in a Halloween costume, and a dog in a tomato costume, and then a cat in a dinosaur costume. The lady handing out fish to the cat and bones to the dogs has a little basket here with fish and dog bones in it. Let's see, we've got a dog in a bee costume and a dog in a skeleton. A little dog in a lion costume. One of my favorites, the dog in the unicorn costume. We've got a crow looking like he's about to go sing in cabaret. And this is it. It's a little bit floppy because I had some trouble filling it. And I would love some expertise from all of you on this. I started to stuff it with polyfill. And it was very, very lumpy, and I don't know if it's because I left a very small hole to turn it and stuff it, which was my error. That's something I learned. And that was what was causing it, or if there's a way to not make it so lumpy. So I ended up pulling out the polyfill and stuffing it with what I had on hand, which was a little bit of ground walnut shell and a little bit of lavender. So it smells delightful, but it's not very full because I didn't have enough to stuff it properly. So if anyone knows the trick on the polyfill, I would love to hear that. Now, the edging was a big departure for me. I used for the first time this lace from Lady Dot Creates. This is Mary Jane lace, and then I covered it with the the licorice chenille, also from Lady Dot Creates, and I really quite like the effect. I was hoping for a few minutes to be able to use just the lace because it was so pretty, but there were a number of sections, especially in the corners, where my stitching was showing and I didn't think it looked quite good enough, and the chenille really just fluffs out over there and hides all the Frankenstein monster stitches underneath. So I'm really quite pleased with what was, for me, the most complicated finish to date. So that will be coming to your shops the end of the month, as I said, so something to look forward to. And next Flosstube, I'll have the other fall release to show you as well, so that will be exciting. Let's see, Stash Spotlight for this week. 2 items of Stash Spotlight. The first, obviously, I've had dogs on my mind, is Dog's Declaration by Ink Circles. I love this. I bought this really the second it came out. And there are a number of things that I particularly love on it. Let's see if I can find it. Oh yes, here is what looks to me like a little greyhound. I love all the different elements. It feels very intricate, but you could just sit down and do an element, you know, the fox under the flowers or a word, and feel like you're making big progress. This also was charted in Valdani thread, and so I bought the thread pack that came with it. I haven't used Valdani thread, so that will be an interesting thing for me to get through for the first time. And as always, if anyone has any tips, I would love to hear them, because that will be fun. And I might even start that when I finish Lucy Beam, the Maria Casson piece that I'm working on, which I think is actually quite close now that I'm not model stitching all the time. So the next Stash Spotlight I have is Jump into Spring from Jeannette Douglas. This is a lovely little piece, and I might be able to squeeze it in because it's so small, but you get to learn, as always with Jeannette Douglas, some great instructions for doing specialty stitches. And one of the reasons I bought it was this row of hearts here, which is not actually a particular stitch from what I can tell. It's just a straight up satin stitch, but I had come across a while ago a heart-shaped stitch, and I think it's called a Rhodes heart, or possibly a variation of the Jessica stitch. Again, if you know, I'd love to hear. And so I thought that little heart row would be an opportunity for me to practice that stitch and fit it right in. But I think it's just really charming. I love the violets. I like the little blue row of almost wreath shapes, little circles. I love the way the basket is done. I think this will be really fun, and I might even use my newly acquired skill with putting lace and chenille around the edge, but I will leave a bigger hole to turn it. So that's the Stash Spotlight. Now on to the world around. This is not from me, but tangentially, my husband recently, I think last weekend, yes, hiked to Mount Talac, which is up in the Sierra Nevadas over Lake Tahoe. And I'll put in some pictures from the top of the mountain. It's lovely. It was a beautiful, although very warm day for it, but going up so high, quite a difficult hike for him. And they saw this mystery bird. So he brought back a little video of the bird, and I'll put that in here as well. And I was so pleased that I was able, with my handy dandy Sierra Nevada field guide, to identify it as either a dusky grouse or a sooty grouse. And apparently the reason for the confusion is that they look extremely similar, particularly in the female birds, which I'll put a picture up. And then the male birds, either a dusky grouse or a sooty grouse. The dusky grouse picture I will put in as well. The sooty grouse essentially looks exactly the same, but the only way you can tell is if they're displaying, because they have that big spot on the side of the neck. And in the dusky grouse, the spot is red. In the sooty grouse, the spot is yellow. But since they only saw a female, they're lumped together also, to make it more confusing, into a group called the blue grouse. So they saw a blue grouse of undifferentiated type on their hike up to the beautiful top of Mount Talac. So that was today's experience of the outside world while stuck inside. Now, on to questions from viewers. So I've had questions on a couple of models. I'm going to go over those. The first was from Jamie, the color of winter. So here's that model. Take a look at that. It's obviously Christmas themed. This was one of my earliest designs, so it was a lot of fun for me to do. I did stitch this one myself. And the idea behind this was using an extremely traditional sampler form. People who know more about this will recognize the form and probably be able to tell exactly where it comes from. I love looking at antique samplers and being able to see a particular layout like this, where you have the outer box with the flowers going up around each side and then a center box with text and scene and other elements in it. And you can see that obviously a teacher or a finished sampler was presented to students and they copied it essentially, but made little changes. So the layout will be exactly the same, many of the colors will be the same, some of them will look nearly identical, some of them will look as though they just had the same template and hugely different interpretations. So on this one, I put sort of quasi caribou reindeer on the bottom and some little elements here using the colors. And some trees with elements, a nice little winter house. Whoops, there's a bit of thread on that. 2 people. The color of springtime is in the flowers. The color of winter is in the imagination on that one. And then on the imagination, I've got all these flowers going up and around and birds and all the wonderful saturated colors that we don't get to see outside during the winter. So that's the color of winter. I know a lot of people have stitched that and I've loved seeing their results. Now from Hello 2, I actually had 2 requests for the summer squirrel and the Halloween squirrel. So I'm going to start with Halloween squirrel. Here it is up close, you can see. I really wanted to do a Halloween squirrel because from very early on I had an image of this squirrel wearing his little Dracula cape. And he's got a medal because I always watched the old Dracula movies and they always had a ribbon and a medal down in the front. And then I've got this, obviously a pumpkin, a little trick-or-treater with her little trick-or-treating drum here, and she's in costume. And the bowl of acorns, because that's what they would get. And this little porch light here made out of an acorn, which I stitched in pretty much every single color in this palette. I stitched that probably 5 times before I found colors that worked and showed up properly and looked the way I wanted them to look. And then this sort of quasi squash vine coming up the other side. So that's Halloween squirrel. And the other one that was requested was Summer Squirrel, which was the most recent of the squirrel series. Let's get that back here. So again, from pretty early on, I wanted the squirrel on a yellow bicycle. I don't know why that was in my mind, but initially she was just on a bicycle and I was going to put the acorns in the basket, but then I had the idea of putting the little tiny squirrel in here. And so then I adjusted the bicycle to be a carrier bike. I put the little squirrel in her little tiny squirrel helmet. Just some fun spring colored flowers and things going around the outside. So that one was a lot of fun to work on. Again, I got to stitch that myself, so really enjoyed it. That's the models. I had a question from Tina on how I chose my design name of the blue flower. Tina, that actually goes back to when I was at university and I was a German major. There's a fairly well-known book in German literature called Heinrich von Ofterdingen, which I didn't love, but it had a motif in the book of the blue flower, which is something that the character sees as they're searching for meaning in life. And so the blue flower has been used in different ways through German Romanticism as this sort of longing for the infinite and hope for the future, and it's a fairly loose idea, so you can apply it to a lot of things that you want. Your general individual search for meaning. Now that's a lot for a cross-stitch label to live up to, but I think for me it just has been a sense of continuing to look for improvement and for hope for the future. And that is something that's important to me, and so that's the name that I chose to put on my label, and hope that it's something that I will live up to in a small way through a cross stitch, which is an area where I can always improve, certainly, and continue to learn new things. Now, best thing this week, two things actually. We have started getting deliveries from a local farm, so we get fresh vegetables every 2 weeks put on our porch, and they're all local organic vegetables. We get cream and eggs and things from the local dairy, all of that, which is a lot of fun for me. It feels nice to be supporting local farms. It feels nice to have very immediately produced vegetables. And then the other thing is that I have started using my good dishes, the ones we usually save for big family gatherings. It's not my good china because it's pottery, but I've started to put the vegetables in my good dishes because you get a bushel's worth of vegetables at once. And so I've got all these serving bowls full of zucchini and onions and garlic all over, but I think it's fun. This is one of my good dishes. I'm trying to use things like this that I would normally keep for special because we're not having family gatherings. I'm not using my good handbags. I'm not wearing my nicest shoes. That's all from a different time and not back yet. And so using the good dishes for my vegetables just makes me feel really happy and like a little treat during the days when sometimes you need a little treat. So that's my things this week. That is all I have for this week. So I don't know if we've made 20 minutes or not because I can't see the timer. I've got a little sticky on my monitor reminding me to look up towards the camera, so I can't see what's happening below the sticky. But hopefully you've enjoyed it. I've loved sort of spending time with you. I really love having the comments, and I look forward to hearing from you. And I will put puppy pictures at the end for those of you who are interested. So thank you again, and I will see you hopefully in 2 weeks with another new release. Bye.